Deinstitutionalization. The Promises and the Reality. In Episode 1, we explored the rise of Kentucky's state hospitals. Huge facilities that once held thousands of people. But by the 1950s and 1960s, a new movement swept across the nation, one that promised freedom, dignity, and a better way. This movement was called deinstitutionalization. It reshaped mental health care in America, including here in Kentucky. And while it began with hope, it ended with consequences our state is still struggling with today. Deinstitutionalization began for several reasons. New psychiatric medications in the 1950s helped stabilize symptoms that once kept people institutionalized for years. Advocates and families pushed for more humane treatment. And overcrowded hospitals made reform feel urgent. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy signed the Community Mental Health Act. Its goal was simple: replace large institutions with small community-based mental health centers close to home. People would receive therapy, crisis care, medication management, and support in their own communities. It was a beautiful idea. But the funding never matched the vision. The federal government planned to build 1,500 community mental health centers. Only half were ever completed. Many had little or no long-term funding. Some opened and closed within a few years. Despite this, hospitals began releasing patients quickly. The transition happened backwards. People left institutions before community services were in place to support them. And that single mistake created ripple effects still felt in Kentucky today. Kentucky followed the national trend. Hospital populations were reduced. Buildings closed. Long-term psychiatric beds became scarce. The intention was compassionate. But the reality was that Kentucky's community system was underfunded from the start. When people left institutions, many still needed support housing, medication monitoring, therapy, transportation, case management, and crisis services. The problem was simple: there weren't enough programs. So people went where the system pushed them. Emergency rooms became holding areas for people in crisis. Jails became one of the largest mental health providers in the state. Homelessness increased for individuals who needed structure and support. Nursing homes took in people with behavioral health needs they weren't equipped to manage. And adult day healthcare programs absorbed gaps the system failed to fill. None of this happened because deinstitutionalization was a bad idea. It happened because deinstitutionalization was never finished. Hospitals closed, but the community system never arrived. The consequences were personal. People who were promised support often received none. Families who needed help were placed on long waiting lists. Individuals who could have thrived with the right structure instead cycled between crisis and survival. Kentucky still feels the impact today. Psychiatric appointment wait times are long. Residential options are limited. There are shortages of psychiatrists and therapists. Homelessness and incarceration remain heavily tied to untreated mental illness. And many individuals fall into programs never intended to replace psychiatric care. This isn't a failure of intention. It's a failure of investment. A house built on a foundation that was never finished. Deinstitutionalization promised freedom, dignity, and community. But promises don't fulfill themselves. Kentucky closed the old doors, but the new doors were never fully built. In Episode 3, we look at one of the most visible consequences of this unfinished system: the rise of homelessness and housing instability, and how many Kentuckians with mental illness fell through the cracks.